Hello and welcome once again to another episode of A Question of Law. This is City TV's legal education program, and on this show we seek to break down the law as far as it concerns us in our daily lives and the activities that we get up to. So use the hashtag A Question of Law on social media if you are watching us on social media. And our WhatsApp line is 0550-585832. We do want to hear from you. The show is interactive. Welcome to A Question of Law. My name is David Kwekusich. We'll be right back after this break. All right, welcome back. Now, my guests are seated in the studio today, and we're going to be talking, some of the current affairs issues that are going on in the media and all of that, and then also very important conversation about domestic violence and what the law has to say about that. We'll get into all of that in just a moment, but let me introduce my guests to you. I have Selim Adonu, who is a private legal practitioner, as well as Albert Ejapong. It's his first time here, and he's also a private legal practitioner. Gentlemen, you're welcome.
Thank you.
All right. So how have you all been? So it's been a minute.
Yeah, it's been a minute. It's been quite a while. I mean, but we're fine. We're good.
Okay.
And we're happy to be here today.
Okay. And Albert, it's good to have you. It's the first time you're here.
It's good to be here. Looking forward to the show.
It's fantastic. Well, the conversations we're going to get into this today, this episode, domestic violence is a very, very big issue within our context. And, there's a few articles that I have came across realizing that, and I'm just going to read headlines. So you can go to citynewsroom.com and check it out. One headline here, published on April 1st, 2021, says, rape, domestic violence still high in Ghana. All right, this is on citynewsroom.com. We have another on a different portal here. It says, rape and domestic violence cases go cold due to mismanagement. Survivors return home. It's a U.S. report on Ghana's situation. And there's another one here, final one. Oxfam Ghana calls for stiffer punishment for domestic violence. And this was this year's publication on City Newsroom, March 13th. So you can cross-check that as well. So this is a very big thing that we want to get into on today's show. But before we go into that, I wanted us to just touch a bit on some of the current stories, one particular one. The Dom Kwabenya MP, who is also the substantive minister for gender, children, social protection, has been out of the jurisdiction for a while. I'm not sure why we are dragging our feet about taking decisions as leadership in this country. Both the executive and the legislature. I know that the Privileges Committee met over three people's issues. Kennedy Japon, what they call the Accra Commando, who they call the Accra Commando, Henry Korte, and then Adjoa Safo. Adjoa Safo wasn't there. I'm not sure. I feel as if the leadership of the country, both on the executive and the parliament, are dragging their feet. I'm not sure why.
Yes, well, you may not be far from the truth when you think or assume so. I think the laws are pretty clear on what must happen. There's a whole article on, how somebody loses his or her seat as member of parliament. And so, just after being a member of parliament, she comes under that provision. So she's bound by that provision. So that provision is Article 97 of the 1992 Constitution. It says a member of parliament shall vacate his seat in parliament. So a number of things that should happen. Yeah. For example, upon dissolution of parliament, once parliament is dissolved, you cannot be a member of that parliament because the parliament is dissolved. B, if he is elected as Speaker of Parliament. Once you are elected as Speaker of Parliament, you cease to become an MP.
Okay.
We recall in 2013 when the Honorable Duajahu was elected by his colleagues to be Speaker. In his, do I call it inaugural speech or acceptance speech?
Yeah.
He gave a speech, and in the last paragraph, he declared his seat vacant.
Okay.
So you cannot be a Speaker and be a member of parliament under our constitution.
Yeah.
The third one, which is of essence to us in this context, is that if he is absent, and that he is a she as well, if he is absent without the permission in writing of the speaker, and he is unable to offer a reasonable explanation to the parliamentary committee on privileges from 15 sittings of a meeting of parliament during any period that parliament has been summoned to meet and continues to meet. So this sounds pretty simple, but to break it down, one, you must be absent.
Yeah.
And your absence doesn't automatically disqualify you. If you are absent and you did so with permission in writing from the speaker, you are safe. Number two, if you are absent without permission from the speaker, then that is trouble. But it is not enough to let you go or to declare your seat vacant. Now, what must happen then is that the Committee of Privileges, which we call the Privileges Committee of Parliament, must now sit on your matter to determine your case.
Okay.
Why so? Why were you absent for 15 days or more?
Yeah.
Perhaps there was an issue that you needed to deal with, or there was an emergency.
Yeah.
And so you did not have the luxury of time to write to the speaker to secure that permission. So the Committee of Privileges will sit on your matter, listen to you, hear you, and make a determination whether the excuse you have is reasonable.
Yeah.
And that is where it becomes subjective.
Okay.
We'll listen to you to see if your reason for absenting yourself for that number of days is reasonable.
Okay.
If it is reasonable, then it means, okay, you can stay. But if the Privileges Committee finds that your reason or your excuse is not reasonable, then that is a problem. Then it means that they must make a decision or make a determination that you indeed vacated your seat by the mere absence for 15 days.
Okay.
That's where it ends. But the interesting thing in this whole Adjosafo case is, one, the nature of this parliament. This parliament is one that is, I mean, it's a parliament of numbers.
It's a hung parliament.
You know, it is 137, 137, 1. I'm not sure if you are 137, 137, maybe 137, 136, because they are saying of MP is barred from sitting in parliament, even though he remains a member of parliament, and I'm sure he's still drawing salary from the consolidated fund. And that's quite an interesting one, you know. And we have one independent. So the numbers are very important.
Yeah.
So the matter of the Privileges Committee, mind you, Adjosafo was not the only one caught by this law. Kennedy Japan was caught by this. Yeah. And then Henry Korte was also caught by this. The two, so they were invited by the Privileges Committee. The speaker referred the matter to the Privileges Committee. The Privileges Committee invited all three of them. The two were present. They gave their reasons or their excuses, generally centered on health matters or health grounds. The committee voted, and we understand it was 15-12.
Okay.
And it was surprising to me that it was 15-12, which to some extent tells you that the voting was along partisan lines or party lines. I don't know whether it was secret ballot or it was open, but I think it should be secret because of the nature of the issue. You know, when matters like this come up, the votes are normally secret. Okay. So a decision was made on them. There was a majority decision that they should stay. However, in the case of Adjosafo, the committee failed to make a decision, and rather, I think they abdicated their responsibility, rather shifted it to the plenary, that she did not appear. But I beg to differ. They invited her to appear. They sent her notices to appear. Whether she got the notices or not, I don't know. But before you enter parliament, there's an address you provide. Your address for official correspondence. Understand she was invited through that address. She was invited through her constituency office. She was invited through many means. Maybe she didn't get it.
But for further clarification, yesterday on Eyewitness News, her PA, spoke and said that he had been in communication with the Privileges Committee, and that he actually, they went through, they were given the Zoom link and all of that, and at the time he called to remind her and he couldn't reach her. You see,
so the PA had been given the Zoom link. For the
that's exactly. That's what he said.
So Adjosafo was aware that there was.
That's what he said. She was aware
Zoom
Yes.
meeting
Yes.
with the Privileges Committee.
Yes.
If that is right,
Yeah.
then I don't see why the Privileges Committee is shying away from doing its responsibility.
Yeah.
Because what is important is that you will be served notice to appear. There's an important rule in law. We call it the law of natural justice. We have what we call the odi autarem partem, which is giving somebody a hearing
Yeah.
before condemning that person.
Yeah.
You can't condemn the person without hearing him. The second one is that a person cannot be a judge in his own cause. But the first one is of
Essence,
relevance
yeah.
here.
Yeah.
That you don't condemn a person
Without first
without first
hearing.
hearing the person. But you see, it is not just left like that. There are exceptions to that. If I invite you to appear for us to hear you, and you fail to appear,
Yeah.
you cannot say you are not given a hearing.
Yeah.
You cannot say so.
Yeah.
So if what the PA tells us is right, then it means she has been adequately invited or informed,
Yeah.
even before the matter of the PA.
Yeah.
We are aware that Parliament invited her using various means. If it were in court, we would have said the court would give an order for substituted service.
Yeah.
Once in a while, you see in the papers, rates of summons and statement of claim, etc. Served on persons who cannot be located.
Yeah.
Once the court gives the order that serve the person through the following modes, maybe on the court's notice board, in newspaper, on WhatsApp, or wherever,
Yeah.
that constitutes adequate or sufficient notice to you. So if you don't respond, the court will go ahead and do what it has to do. What happens in Parliament is not very different.
Yeah.
It is the same rules they play by. So they cannot say, Adosafo cannot say that she has not been invited. What her PA even says doesn't really help a case. She's been invited and she had to appear.
Yeah.
So I'm quite disappointed in the Privileges Committee for abdicating their responsibility. Once you serve the person notice to appear and the person fails to appear, you go ahead and do your job.
Yeah.
And write a report to cover that. Report goes back to speaker or the plenary, and what has to be done will have to be done. So as far as I'm concerned, the Privileges Committee is not done its job well in respect of this matter. Merely also because of the political, tug of war in the House.
Yeah.
Interestingly, the majority side from the numbers want the seat to be declared vacant.
Yeah.
So a new MP is sworn in, so they have their numbers.
Yeah.
The minority side, interestingly, are those defending
Adosafo.
So you see the politics in there.
Yeah.
So once, the first time I read this provision, normally the provisions are that you read them.
Yeah.
But it's when a matter comes up that you go back to look at it again.
Yeah.
When I saw that the Privileges Committee will have to make a decision or a determination, then I knew that politics will
by all means
come to play.
Yeah.
And that is what we are seeing now.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it shouldn't have been a very difficult
it's a
matter.
developing story, so we'll
Yes.
definitely see where it goes. Albert, I don't know if you have any comments.
Yes,
to
I just
make.
have a couple of things
Yeah.
to add to what Solomon said. I think that Article 97 is pretty clear, and if you break down the provision Solomon read to us, it creates a checklist. You have to be absent for 15 sittings in a meeting. You must not have had authorization from the Speaker, and the Privileges Committee must find that you have no reasonable excuse. I think two of those conditions are ripe. So the Privileges Committee dragging their feet is one way of stalling the process from continuing, because once that is done, then the question becomes, does it mean that once they determine that Adosafo did not have a lawful reason or a reasonable excuse for being absent, her seat becomes vacant, or do we need a Speaker to
determine
make a determination? I think those are two questions that are raised. But I also want to look at this from another point of view. I think that if the Privileges Committee continue to drag their feet, the Constitution provides another remedy to declare that seat vacant. If you go to Article 99, and if I may read,
Okay.
it says that the High Court shall have jurisdiction to hear and determine any question whether A person has been validly elected as a member of Parliament, or the seat of a member has become vacant. So you see, there's a remedy in law.
Okay.
So if the Privileges Committee are not willing or prepared to carry out their part of the work, I think that, especially
Then go to-
constituents of Dome Kwabena,
Kwabena.
I am personally one,
Okay.
have a remedy in law. That's
Okay.
to go to
They
the
can
High
actually
Court
go to
to
the
ask
High
the High
Court.
Court,
Okay.
just as the people of Asin North are doing regarding the election of Honorable J.K. Person.
Yes.
Yes, I think there are a number of remedies available,
Okay.
and we'd have to explore.
Well, like I said, it's a developing story, so this one we'll definitely see where it goes, and we'll talk about it further in the future as it develops. But she also happens to be the minister for Gender, Children, and Social Protection, under which this conversation of domestic violence falls squarely. Okay, so let's get into the domestic violence conversation. What would you describe as domestic abuse or domestic violence?
Well, so domestic.
And I ask that question because somebody will say spanking a child is domestic violence.
Well, it depends. That's interesting. It depends. So, I mean, the matters of domestic violence are actually governed by law.
Okay.
So there's a law, Act 732, which is being passed to regulate matters of domestic violence. And I think its interpretation section 42, actually defines what abuse is in the context of domestic violence.
Okay.
So it says that abuse means conduct that harms or may cause imminent harm to the safety, health, or well-being of the complainant.
Okay.
Or the complainant, usually being the person suffering the abuse.
Yes.
So once it can be determined that a certain conduct or action
harming,
harms or may cause imminent harm. So the harm may not have occurred.
Yeah.
But it causes imminent harm or may cause imminent harm to the safety, health, or well-being of the complainant. That becomes an abuse.
Okay.
So that abuse in a domestic setting, becomes domestic abuse or domestic violence generally. So the law has been very detailed on what constitutes domestic violence. And any crime that occurs outside the home, when it occurs in the home, that becomes, a violent crime, that becomes part of domestic violence as well.
Okay.
The Criminal Offences Act details a number of offences or crimes. When those crimes, violent crime maybe, occur in the home, that forms or constitutes domestic violence as well. So we have specifics such as physical abuse, hitting somebody, which is what we see often, use of physical force against another person, including even the forcible confinement of the person, like you lock the person in a room. That is physical abuse, and that is not correct. That is frowned upon by the law. Depriving somebody of access to adequate food and water, etc., that becomes domestic abuse. And quite a number of things the law talks about. So even sexual abuse, abusing somebody sexually, is part of domestic violence. And normally when we say sexual abuse, we look at it in terms of forcefully making somebody have a sexual contact with you, etc. That is what covered. That's domestic abuse. However, if you have an STD or HIV, for example, and you have sexual contact with your domestic mate or somebody you share the house with or home with, your spouse or somebody, and you don't inform that person that you have this STD, for the person to make a decision whether they want to engage with you or not, and you go ahead and do so, that constitutes domestic abuse, domestic violence as well.
Wow.
That is sexual abuse, and that constitutes domestic violence. So there's emotional or verbal or psychological abuse, which we see often as well. So you say, I don't beat anybody, but you do other things that equally are abusive of the person. So physical, emotional, verbal, psychological, etc.
I think hearing you say this, I think it's a very important point for us to, hit on hard, because in our culture, it is seen that if you didn't touch the person, you have not brought any harm to the person. Albert, I don't know what your thoughts are.
I think that the law as we have it now is very broad when it comes to what constitutes domestic violence. Emotional abuse is domestic violence. Even financial abuse. So there's financial resources, assets that a person is legitimately entitled to, but you deprive the person of those resources as a means to control that person. It's also a form of domestic violence, and what young people call gaslighting someone. So emotionally abusing the person. You don't physically touch them, but you control them, you deprive them of access to relatives, to friends. It all falls under domestic violence under our laws as we have it now. So it's a broad scope of what constitutes domestic violence in Ghana.
So for example, if you have a spouse, and because the spouse has done something to you are not happy with, you fail to leave what we call housekeeping money or pocket money,
chop money,
that is domestic violence as well. And so for that reason,
Okay.
you can be in some trouble.
Okay.
So anything you do that abuses the person, that causes harm or may cause imminent harm to the person's health, emotions, etc. That
There's a
falls within
law.
the scope of.
There's a law
domestic
differentiates when
violence.
it comes to whether it's a man or a woman or a child.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't.
So our law is gender neutral when it comes to domestic violence. Oftentimes, the reportage and the social commentary is between women being the victims of domestic violence. But our law actually contemplates situations where men are also the victims of domestic violence. But because of stigma and social conditions, most men are not considered victims of domestic violence. But men can also file complaints for domestic violence. So if the shoe is turned and it is the man who's being deprived of financial resources, I'll not cook for him. I'll not let him eat. I want to teach him a lesson.
Yeah.
You may be bordering on the lines of domestic
I'll deprive him
violence.
of sex.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's also
For ABC reasons.
Wow.
it's also potentially domestic violence.
On that note, we're going to take a short break and we will come back. I want to start with that one. I'm very interested in that part. We'll take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
City TV is live on DSTV. Go to channel 363. On GoTV, access City TV on channel 182. On a digital TV, please press the menu button on the remote control and run a new search on your TV. Take note that without an antenna, you cannot access City TV on your television. City TV can be accessed on a free-to-air digital box like the GoTV and Star Times box. City TV, it's your world.
All right, welcome back from that break. And we're talking domestic violence and domestic abuse and what the law has to say about that. So I'm particularly interested in this conversation about denial of sex.
Yes.
It's domestic violence.
It is from the law. So sexual abuse.
Okay.
So for example, the Maslow hierarchy of needs, it's not the law per se, but it's not the law actually. But it's now added sex to the basic needs of human beings. So we have food, shelter, clothing, and now there is sex.
Okay.
So it becomes one of the basic needs. So when you are depriving somebody of his or her basic need, that becomes an abuse. You are abusing the person. So it's a very important.
But can somebody argue that I'm not the only one who can provide you sex, and so you can't hold me to ransom? If it's like food, right? So if you're an adult, can you argue that somebody's denying you of food?
No, of course, you can. You are of course, adultery is not illegal. It may be immoral, but there's no law which outlaws adultery, if I may say it that way.
Okay.
So you can deny the person sex. That is an abuse. That's domestic violence. That's an abuse. But of course, that person may not be the only person to give you food. But the fact that you are not the only person to give me food or sex doesn't answer the question whether the denial is an abuse or not.
Okay.
You are the person I want to be with, and rightly so.
Okay.
But for whatever reason, you have denied me. I suffer some abuse as a result of that.
See.
And if that will affect my well-being, as Maslow now says,
It's
that
one of the
sex
needs.
is part of
Yeah.
the basic needs. Once it will affect my well-being, as we saw earlier in section 42 of the Act, that surely qualifies as an abuse.
Albert, you spoke earlier about economic abuse
Yes.
as well. Break that down a little further for us to understand. I mean, how can somebody abuse another economically.
Okay. So I think before I go, I just want to give a bit of a context. When we are looking at domestic violence, and so far I've noticed that the discussion has been of one husband and wife, people in a relationship. But children can also be the victims of domestic violence, because the law contemplates a situation where a house help or someone you are in a domestic relationship with, which could be a child, is a victim of domestic violence. So with that context, when we are discussing economic abuse, we are talking about where one person is in a position to provide economically for another person, but as a means of punishment of one reason or the other, is depriving that person of access to those economic opportunities, depriving that person of use of economic resources that they are legitimately entitled to. That would also constitute domestic violence. I think Salom gave a good example where I'm upset with my wife. I am not going to leave job money when I know that she has a legitimate right or expectation to that money, one, or she is expecting that money. Without that money, she cannot live. Or we have a joint account together. I am unilaterally running the account. I have blocked her out, or I've blocked him out of the account. So I'm not letting the man have access to the account. That is a form of economic abuse. I live with a child, house help. Every month he's entitled to X amount of money. I pay the money but refuse to give it to him, so he cannot take care of his basic needs. That's also a form of economic abuse that leads to domestic violence.
Let's talk about the place of resolution. So an organization like DOFSU steps in to say that you can come and report incidences of domestic violence. Now, there are a lot of people who are watching us who will probably have some experience with dealing with DOFSU. And I have heard things, and I don't necessarily have any verification on the veracity of these things. But I've heard things like a man goes to lodge a complaint at DOFSU that he's being abused. Now, even though the merits, or should I say the facts he presents may seem valid, there's a social or societal construct that makes him a mockery, where I've heard people say that the police at DOFSU are now mocking him and saying, you're a man, and
Yes, we've heard these are societal or social problems, and that is what the law must help fix. And that's what education on what the law says must be improved, so people get to understand things. Of course, there's a recent matter where the woman actually beat up the man at the police station.
Oh wow!
Yeah, the woman beat up the man at the police station. I asked the man, why didn't you do anything?
Yeah.
He said no. He wanted the police to know what he suffers at home.
Okay.
And in fact, that matter went on, and the lady eventually was jailed for 15 days. For contempt and for abuse and that kind of thing. Yeah. So it's real, but there's a way culture. So you see, it's a patriarchal system.
Yeah.
So how are you even going to tell your friends that my wife has beaten me? I mean,
it sounds odd.
How are you going to present that? Yeah. The first question will be, why is your wife bigger and taller than you, or what? It should not be.
Yeah.
And that is why it's important that we have programs like this to educate people. Before, it used to be women and juvenile unit of the Ghana Police Service.
Waju. Okay.
So that also, I think, do I say that deepened that impression, or that came out of that impression?
Okay.
That domestic abuse
is women and
is just women and children.
Yeah.
Because they did not see the men as suffering abuses, even though men also do suffer abuses.
Yeah.
So in order to level it up and to make it more gender neutral and expand the scope, we now have the domestic violence and victim support unit.
Yeah.
So the victim could be a male or female.
Okay.
It could be a child. It could be anybody. Once the person suffers the abuse, the person is the victim.
Yeah.
So that levels the playing field a bit and should ordinarily take out the stigma or that kind of thing around it. But what will help that is education.
Okay.
And a lot more people speaking up about what they go through. Of course, men go through a lot of things, but we are raised to be macho. So even though you are suffering, you say you are not suffering.
Yeah.
I think we need to move away from that and know how and learn how to be vulnerable sometimes, and also learn how to speak about our fears and our problems and our difficulties openly. It's when we do that we can have help.
Yeah.
So if your wife is beating you up or your wife is depriving you of some basic needs and you are suffering, you don't have to suffer in silence because you may die. You may have mental health problems which would destroy you in the end. Speak about it. Seek help. Victim support unit. They are there to support victims. Once you go there, I hope they'll be professional. They will not laugh at you. I know a lot of them are professional, and so they will address your concerns, and then I'm sure you'll be fine.
Albert, I don't know if you have any comments.
So I think when you started with the premise that is there a place where we go to go and talk about it, and it's reaffirming a general social narrative that exists culturally about abuse. That's something that we talk about and we push it under the rug, we resolve. But if you look at what the law contemplates, once you've carried out activity that falls within the definition of domestic violence, the remedy available is criminal. It's a criminal remedy. I mean, there are other remedies, but the procedure or how the law looks at domestic violence is with a criminal lens.
Okay.
So once you make the complaint, it's not an issue of we are talking it out for us to settle it, but it's an issue of going through the criminal process. So the complainant then takes the accused person or makes the report. The accused person goes through the criminal process. I also think that might be one of the reasons why a lot of people don't go ahead with the complaints, because the moment you file the complaints, you know that the police are getting involved, my spouse or domestic partner is going to be arrested and is going to go through that criminal process, with the consequence being either a fine or a term of imprisonment. So I think that the narrative now that domestic violence, or the fact that people deal with domestic violence through the criminal system, is one of the reasons why perhaps the numbers are still high, because people are hesitant to report. I do not want to be the one that I put my housemate, my spouse, my master behind bars. The law does, under certain circumstances, the law says that where the contemplated punishment is less than 2 years, and even that you have to be before a court, and the court makes that determination, the court may encourage mediation as a means of settling it. But as it stands now, domestic violence is criminal in nature. You go through the criminal process, and the outcome is the criminal outcome, which is usually a term of imprisonment or a punishment. So that may be one of the reasons why domestic violence numbers are still high despite the enactment of the law.
So to add to what Albert has just said, so it's criminal. So you go through the criminal process. However, if the complainant is amenable to settling the matter out of court, the law makes provision for that. But the law makes provision for such crimes only if they are not aggravated. So, for example, if there is an issue of, should I say, rape of maybe a house help, you can't want to deal with that. You can't want to settle that out of court, even though it happens, we know. But that shouldn't be.
When we say aggravated in the law, what does it mean?
So, for example, the law says that, so the law, this Act 732, in terms of the crimes that this Act will deal with, we'll look at misdemeanors misdemeanors in respect of Act 29 or the Criminal Offences Act. Anything that goes beyond misdemeanors, this Act calls it aggravated. So something that will put you in jail for more than 2 or 3 years, then that becomes aggravated. So, for example, if there is a murder matter, you can't say you want to settle out of the family. You know, that is aggravated. So the full extent of the law must be explored. But if it's a simple matter that the law thinks you can resolve, and you are amenable to settlement out of court, let's say economic deprivation or something, you are amenable to it being settled out of court. You know, there can be a mediation system. The social welfare, those who extra can help you. That is where communities, the church elders, etc., come in to help mediate the matters and seek or work towards a resolution.
At what point should somebody say enough is enough? You know, it's time to go and report. At what point?
I think just when you start seeing the signs.
Really?
Just when you start seeing the signs, you must be on the lookout. You know, because you don't necessarily have to be hit before. There is the imminent cause of harm.
Oh, yeah.
When there is that thinking that the harm could be caused. So, for example, if your spouse continues to tell you that I'll kill you, or I'll beat you, or takes a knife and rashes on you, you won't say because he or she is not cut me with a knife, I'll wait till that happens. You may die. So once you suspect, I think it's important to make a report so that the law or the necessary institutions will be on the lookout for anything funny.
Just to add to what Selon says, so the law does not require a certain threshold to be met. It says that one activity, or once it happens once, enough to constitute domestic violence. And remember that we said that the definition of domestic violence is not just physical violence, it's psychological, it's emotional. So the moment the pattern of behavior starts, you don't wait for it to escalate. Once you see the pattern, once there's that emotional, once there's that psychological, you can make the complaint to the requisite authorities.
So an interesting one also will be that if you are even dating somebody, that if you maltreat a person or you abuse a person, it's grounds for domestic violence.
Wow.
So there are people
in a dating relationship.
Yes, there are people whose should I say dates or boyfriends or girlfriends abuse or beat them. So they beat them. The girlfriends or girlfriends, yes,
it's not always
beat them. And I remember when I was in university, I heard a story like that, and I was so surprised, that the girl actually liked it, and I thought it was bizarre. It was bizarre. I thought it was a disorder. But it happens, Also, the law does not say that because you consented to the abuse, it is not abuse, it is not domestic violence. The law actually says that domestic violence is domestic violence. So in Section 4, it says that the use of violence in the domestic setting is not justified on the basis of consent. You can't say you consented to...
That's in the Constitution.
That's in the Act, the Domestic Violence Act. You can't say because you consented to the abuse, it's no more an abuse. No. Because the law knows that things could happen and the complainant or the victim could say, I wanted it, it's okay. But that is not how the law is protected. The law has to protect you with all its power.
There's a funny story behind this issue of consent. So for the longest time, marital rape was permitted because there was this notion that once you marry, you consent. And it extended to domestic violence as well, because they said any form of assault, that once you were married, the law excluded marriage as being one of the means which you couldn't give consent. So there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of women pressure groups asking for the law to be repealed, but it was heavily resisted. It wasn't until 2006, during the statute review commission process, they were going over our laws, and VCRAC Crab of blessed memory quietly just deleted that part from the laws. So when it went to Parliament and it was passed, it was no longer part of our laws. So what that single act did was now to make it such that you cannot use the fact that we are married to be a defense that once we are married, you are automatically consented. Yes. So it was that act by VCRAC Crab that relieved that kind of pressure of people in marital situations.
I find it interesting that our society's norms seem in a lot of places quite at variance with what we've decided to do as a people in terms of our constitution. I don't know how we got here.
So a lot of the cultural practices are inhumane. So things like female genital mutilation. People still in Ghana think that it is the way to go. So had it not been that laws were passed to outlaw such practices, people will still be doing. In fact, even whilst we have laws, people are still doing it. So it's only when we identify those people, pick them up, and punish them that the larger majority will get to know that it is wrong to do so. Why do you mutilate somebody's genital for whatever reason? Why do you do that? That is wrong. And some widowhood rights, which are very abusive of people. Society culturally thinks that those things must happen for whatever reason. But if those things, are not dignifying to the parties involved, they should not be continued. So the laws have tried to now take back some of those things, to clean those things up, so that because you know that when you do that, you will be punished, they stop those things. So there's a cultural problem that we are gradually solving with the law, so that one culture is not above the other. The law is supreme. It is the law that we must work with, not your culture necessarily, even though there's a place for culture.
All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. Up next will be the docket.
City TV is live on DSTV. Go to channel 363. On GoTV, access City TV on channel 182. On a digital TV, please press the menu button on the remote control and run a new search on your TV. Take note that without an antenna, you cannot access City TV on your television. City TV can be accessed on a free-to-air digital box like the GoTV and Star Times box. City TV, it's your world.
All right, welcome back. Now it's time for the docket. This is that segment of the show where we take your issues, your challenges, and then we address them here on the show. And today on the docket, dear, a question of law. My husband of 30 years recently threw me out of our matrimonial home after a series of disagreements and quarrels. He subsequently went to my family to divorce me by sending drinks to my parents. We were young when we married and now have 3 children, 2 houses, and 2 cars. He threw me out with no money and without recourse to the years I toiled with him to acquire his properties. Will that be the end of it all? Don't I deserve anything from the wealth of the family? How can the law help me? All right, gentlemen, our work is cut out.
Yes, quite an interesting thing, and it happens very often. So, we've been married for 30 years.
There was actually an incident recently about a couple like that.
Yes, I mean, it's all over the place. Things happen, things like this are commonplace. They happen a lot.
Yeah.
But it's important that we give this education so people know.
Yeah.
So, of course, like we always say, you get a lawyer to advise you. So what we're saying is just to guide you and make you know what is possible.
Yeah.
So the law as it stands now is that you cannot just be thrown out like that. You know, once she says that they toiled together to get a property, it means that she has a stake in there. In fact, you know, it used to be that, you know, a woman really did not have any stake in a man's property. You know, the woman could suffer with the man to get some property or acquire some property. But the woman really did not have any stake in it. You know, Oleno and Co. thought so.
Yeah.
Then from Benjamin Nance came with the principle of substantial contribution, etc. That okay, you have a stake in it, but you must prove that you substantially contributed. You know, your contribution must be quantified, and so that quantification gives you a stake in it in terms of percentage or whatever. Okay. That position. So these are old positions being fine-tuned. So later on, Bamford Addo, Dateba, Duce, GSC, all these Supreme Court judges, or in cases, evolved what has become known as the 50-50 or the equality equity principle. Okay. Indeed, that is also shifting a bit to something else. So what that 50-50 principle said was, once you're married to the person, anything that the person acquires, you have a 50% stake in there. Okay. However, if the property in question was a gift or something the person had by way of inheritance, that one you have nothing to do with it. So that is off. That is off for you on the table. You know, so
does it matter your contribution to the property?
So now that should there's been new positions. So in the 50-50, it didn't matter. Of course, the argument was that the man will go to work, get money, acquire the property. But the woman was also home. Yeah. Taking also care working. Of the home, working, washing, cooking, doing other things. And if you were to quantify and doing those things give you peace of mind to work
To be
hard
able
to
to go
acquire
and
those
work,
things.
yeah.
So if we were to quantify all those things she did domestically, that should also count for something.
Yeah.
So on the basis of that, it should be 50-50. You know, so which meant that spousal property was joint property. Later on, Georgina Wood, I think, in Fin and Fin, came up with this thing about individuals, even though married, are able to get properties on their own, because the Constitution says that everybody should be able to get property on their own. So the fact that you are married and property has been acquired does not necessarily mean that it is joint property.
Okay.
And there were some conditions for that. Now, it must be shown that you actually intended it to be property you own on your own, you own by yourself, and a few nuances. So that's where the law is now. So getting back to the scenario or the problem we have at hand, she cannot just be thrown out like that.
Okay.
That would be unfair for her. They've been married for 30 years. They've acquired properties, 2 houses and 2 cars, I think. She must make a 50% stake in the properties. She must make a 50% stake in the properties so acquired, because she had made some contribution. The court will decide whether indeed she deserves the 50% or she deserves something more or something lower. But she should surely make a stake or claim something.
Yeah.
She shouldn't just take it lying down. 30 years, they throw you out with your bag and you go back home. No, that would be unfair, and the law frowns on that.
I think another concern that she may have, particularly with the property, is that it's all in the name of the man. But now the law has become progressive just to keep up with times. So even where the name of the property is in one spouse, once you are married and it's acquired within the course of the marriage, it will be treated as though that spouse is holding it for the two of you.
Okay.
So that spouse cannot sell it or give it out without your prior consent.
Okay.
Yes, so once the property was acquired during the course of the marriage, even if it's in the man's name alone, technically belongs to the two of them. The law recognizes that interest.
So it's interesting. The New Land Act, that's what he was referring. The New Land Act actually makes it clear that if I have a land and I want to dispose it of, my spouse must actually consent before I'm able to dispose it of.
Wow.
That's been done to protect spouses. It actually cuts both ways.
Yeah.
If it's a spouse that has the property,
Okay.
and of course the key thing to know is that the property must have been acquired during the subsistence of the marriage. If the property was acquired before the marriage,
it doesn't hold.
It doesn't hold.
Okay.
But of course, there could be arguments that improvements and things were done on the property. Maybe there was land before I came. After I came, a building came on it. Okay. There could be arguments back and forth for that. But that's why the courts are there to see where fairness and justice will lie, and they'll do that. So surely she must take it up. She shouldn't take it lying down.
Okay.
She should surely get something from it.
Okay, and so generally, in terms of remedy for cases of this one, I don't know what you would call it. Would it fall under abuse, economic abuse?
Well, this is property. Some property somebody's entitled to, and you are refusing to give it to the person. That's economic. But would that be economic abuse?
I am inclined to say so.
Yes.
So, I mean, we'd need more information on that. But and this is just a hypothetical here, it is that she has nowhere else to go. She depended on the man for income, etc., and he's depriving her of that. Then it could constitute economic
And after
abuse.
30 years, probably her parents are not even alive.
But the parents said they went to the parents. Okay, in our context, you can
The,
say
the family, they went back
yes,
to the family, which is not
to give the drinks to them.
So if that is the case, recall that we said that domestic violence in Ghana looks at it from a criminal lens. But even within that criminal process, what the court can do is the court can give you compensation to compensate you for the loss that you have suffered.
Okay.
But she may want to explore other avenues. Perhaps she's not looking to have him go through the criminal process. What she wants is a fair share. Then she may be looking at terminating the marriage herself, going through the divorce proceedings and then getting that declaration. But by way of domestic violence...
But the divorce is actually occurred. I'm inclined to think it's a customary marriage. So once the drinks and those things have been done,
then there's
she can still go
application
back to
court.
Okay.
and make a claim for her share of the property. Because the divorce is done. If it was customary marriage, once the drinks and those things have been done, that's the end.
Done.
Okay. Even though they could have gone to court to dissolve it. The Matrimonial Causes Act makes room for dissolution of marriage by the court, even if it's a customary marriage.
Okay.
But in this case, I'm sure it's done. But it's not done in respect of the properties.
Okay.
She can still go to court. That may not be a divorce petition. It could be a general writ she may issue for her share of the property.
Yeah, I see. Wow.
And just
Yes,
cut
go
in.
ahead,
To
yeah.
add, you mentioned the issue of remedies. I just wanted us to touch on domestic violence remedies. Like we said, apart from the imprisonment and the fine and the compensation, the law also gives the courts the capacity to make protective orders once you file a complaint. So the protective orders could be in the nature of a restraining order. The person should stay a certain
Distance
feet away from you. Yes. The person should not come into your house without your consent. If you are living in different houses, the person should stop certain behavior or activities that they are carrying out. So these protective orders that the courts can make can be interim whilst the case is ongoing, or can be after the case is done. So that's also another remedy that a potential victim of domestic violence can enjoy. Then another thing under the law too is that there's meant to be a victim support fund established under the law to help rehabilitate victims of domestic violence. But that fund was inactive. I think Martin Pebu was in court a couple of years ago to get a court order to compel the state to set up and establish the fund. The fund, the outcome of the decision was that the state should go ahead and establish the fund. But as to whether that has been done or not now, I am not in a position.
So you see, we mentioned issues of there were issues about shelter. Somebody's abused, in their house. You take the where do you put the person? Is a police? Is a police? Equipped to do that. So we have shelters. This fund will help those shelters so that women can or spouse people can find places to live. So if a child is being abused and you take the child from where do you put the child? So that's why people like ACT Foundation, etc. should be encouraged. And the fund is actually supposed to help support the work or support the work they do.
If you look at the name of the full meaning of DOVSU, is victim support is part of the things that they do. Yes. So if they are not empowered and their capacity is not built, then they cannot achieve the full mandate of what they are meant to
All right. Do. Superb. Well, let's take a look at our legal trivia for today.
Legal trivia. Did you know that a parent shall not deprive a child his welfare, whether the parents of the child are married or not at the time of the child's birth, or the parents of the child continue to live together or not, and that every child has the right to life, dignity, respect, leisure, liberty, health, education, and shelter from his parents. This can be found in Section 6 of the Children's Act 1998, Act 560. Take note and do the needful.
All right. Thank you once again for watching another episode of A Question of Law. Let me say a big thank you to my guest today, Selma Donu, who is a private legal practitioner, as well as Albert Ejapon, also a private legal practitioner. Thank you very much for joining us today. And thank you to you for watching as well. Keep watching City TV. My name is David Kwekusechi. Take care.